Hello, my name is Randy Wooden, and in this section we're going to be talking about why church consultation and church revitalization. When we begin to talk about revitalization, we're talking about reviving or bringing vitality back into an organization or church. Without a doubt, this is always a desire. In the old church, we would call it revival. Many a times reviving something that had become dead. We don't believe that you're dead necessarily, but I do believe there's areas that are not thriving that sometimes we need help in being able to discover those things. It's important for us to realize that over 90% of the church consults that happen are usually surrounded around revitalization, on things that need to be revitalized and realized. The same number of 90% of consultations many a times represent churches that are either in decline or they're growing slower than their community is growing. Church revitalization is one of those key issues which is a discussion in many church groups and many a times in mentoring groups of how can we improve. My whole ministry of 36 years of pastoring was about evaluating and assessing and then improving and ultimately wanting to be able to impact people's lives in my congregation. But so many times there was seasons where I seemed to hit a wall or I seemed to be struggling. Many a times, leaders will make statements like, that really make us aware that we need somebody else to come alongside of us. When we begin to say, things just don't feel right, or, I want to know how I'm doing. Or we will make statements like, growth used to be easy, but it's not easy any longer. One person said, as long as we keep more people going in the front door than we go out the back door, we're okay. But it seems like there's a revolving door in my church. On and on of the issues that pastors find themselves in today. I know on two different occasions in the 26-year ministry of the one church that I had served prior to going into church consulting, that I brought an outside person in to begin to help us in consulting of where we were and yet where we wanted to go. On both of those times, I learned immensely things that I needed to know, not only about myself personally, but also about the organization and the leaders that I was trying to lead. I really believe it's important for us to realize in consulting that it is about bringing in a new set of eyes that can see maybe what we're not seeing any longer. I remember I had an old car that had a cracked rear view mirror in it. And after a period of time, I just didn't even think anything about it until someone got in the car and said, your mirror's all broke up. And I'd gotten so used to it being that way that I wasn't paying attention any longer. I think sometimes this is what happens in the church, that there's things going on. We just, because we're in the day-to-day stuff, taking care of people, trying to make ministry happen, that we forget and we don't see some things that are really areas that are not only obstacles, but areas sometimes that can be removed to begin to bring about a growth pattern again in our organization. With that said, I think really part of church consulting is much like a physician and going to a doctor. By no means am I calling myself a doctor, but I believe it's a sense of doing a checkup. I think I had read that it's important for a church to do kind of a checkup or a consultant every 3 years and looking at its health and its vitality, as well as looking at its productivity, so to speak. But I think when we go to a doctor, many a times we realize, in what we see, the unseen areas of blood work. And all of a sudden we say, hey, your A1C is too high, or this area of your blood of cholesterol is the good or the bad is too high. And what we have to realize is we need those checkups in the church. Not only that, but sometimes just realizing some things are broke. 2 weeks ago, I went through a fall. And when I went through the fall, I broke my wrist and dislocated it and had to go in for surgery and put a plate and screws in this wrist. Now I'm starting to wiggle my hands again or my fingers again, but still can't bend my wrist, but I'm getting ready to start some therapy to begin to bring back mobility and strength to this. Now, if I would have chose not to have surgery and I just put a cast on it, then it's going to stay relocated. I'm never going to be able to use that wrist to its potential. But I wonder how many of us have things that are broke in our organizations. We don't even realize they're broke, or we know they're broke, but we don't know what to do about it. You know, let me be honest for a moment, is one of the things that I want to provide as a church consultant is honest assessment with love and to bring about some practical approaches to, you know, sometimes, let's just be honest, some things just need to die, and we need to celebrate the times that we had, and we need to revisit, you know, what needs to happen now. And then there's other times there are things that are broke that can be reset and fixed, and they can become more vital and have new vitality and be even more productive in the future. But I think sometimes we have to know the difference. You know, in that honest assessment, this is the hard part. And I'm just going to be kind of blunt, so to speak, because I think this is where I found myself sometimes as a pastor, and that is with just a little bit of pride. And when I talk about a little bit of pride, I mean, I don't want to know what's going on that's bad, because it shines a negative light on my leadership. You know, I've learned that people who are willing to bring in consultants or bring in people with different voices and wisdom are people who are usually secure in their own skin. And I'll tell you that it took me a while to get there, because early on I struggled greatly with inadequacy. And I thought, man, the last thing I need to do is let somebody come in. And of course, when I started ministry 30, 40 years ago, I never heard of a church consultant. And of course, we had plenty of church consultants in our church trying to tell us what we're doing right and wrong. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about somebody who has been in your shoes, somebody who knows how to come in and work with your leaders and listen and become a listening ear. One of the things that will happen, and you'll see it in a couple more videos, I'm going to share some of the clear and some of the assessments that would be used in a church consultant setting, and some of the things we will do when we come on site and what you can expect. So part of the reason for these videos is to educate you on what I believe we will bring when we come into the setting of your church. But I think it's important for all of us to realize that there is a need for church consulting, and especially a need for revitalization and keeping things fresh on every level of our ministries and our churches. And in this COVID era that we have been in or still wrestling with, it definitely put a harder cramp upon us trying to get to everybody, and everybody being, in church and being productive. But I think so many times is people want to be a part of something that they know not only is growing, but it's got vitality, and they're a part of something. And I really believe that all of our people want to be a part of something that has an eternal perspective to it, that is going to make an impact, and is not only going to make an impact, but is going to have relationships, because people are needing relationships. And so many times, just coming in a setting and seeing where is the church in its unity, where is everybody on the same page. It's amazing to me when you go into a setting, and I've been in those settings where you're listening to leaders, you're asking questions, and you're realizing, man, they've got 10 leaders and they got 3 different groups in this 10 that are on 3 different pages. They're not even in the scope of what is the mission and vision of this ministry. And so part of that honest assessment is to say, hey, these are some things we see. Do you see them? Do you agree? Do you disagree? And at the same time, giving some answers and some tools and resources at the end of the consult that is going to help you begin to make some progress in the next steps for the ministry and its future. Let me just say this. I really believe that statistics are very, very helpful. Sometimes we don't want them, but they're helpful. It helps us to really see where we're at, not only in our numbers of growth. A lot of pastors don't even really understand and see that, don't understand that they're even declining and looking at something. Many a times we usually go back a minimum of 5 years and begin to look at a historical process of not only the numbers, growth, but also the finances, and begin to look at all those things and ask those questions that may need to be asked, but also just giving that information. Also talking about demographics and psychographics, that we're going to begin to give you the opportunity to know more about who your community is. It's amazing to me that many of us in our community, and we're looking at the people in our congregation, and we have to ask the question, which is a painful one sometimes, is does the people I have in my congregation even reflect my community? And is your church in a community that your community knows you're there? We did a survey 20 years ago in the church I was pastoring, and we went to several neighbors. I think we did 200 households in several of the subdivisions in the area we were at. We were asking a question: did they know who we were? And I think it was a series of 5 questions. And what we realized is that no one knew who we were, number one. Not only that, but no one would miss us if we left there. And I'll never forget going to my congregation and telling them, you realize, that no one in the community knows us, but the only people who would miss this church if we closed it would be you. And the difficulty was that I did not like this, but 90% of the people that were in my church weren't even from my community. They were outside. They drove in, many of them 15, 20 minutes, and we were in a mega area. This in our city was over 300,000 people. So it made me realize and take a step back and say, hey man, we've got to start doing something different. So part of this also process of church consulting, and what we needed is to know our community, the people that we're trying to reach. And sometimes we don't even know those things. I think this is so important for all of us to realize. Not only that, but sometimes what I would say the most obvious suggestions may become the most revolutionary. There's some things sometimes we say and we do that, man, light bulbs go on, say, yeah, we need to do this. And instantly it begins to spark some new energy and momentum for the ministry. But I think it's important for us to realize the elements that are most important. Without a doubt, I want to say this too, is the pulpit is still one of the most powerful tools and of influence to impact people's lives, not only with the word, but the influence of making the difference that they're in the earth to make. And this is some of the things that we want to just be able to empower and encourage, the things that are already being done in your ministry, but also things that obviously have got to change, or they are going to become the wall that you hit, or going to become the obstacle that keeps you from the purpose and the vision of God. See, I really believe God is still growing the church. And not only is he growing the church, but I believe it's his will for your ministry to grow. And it's your ministry to be an influence in your community. I believe that if you will take the opportunity to reach out and contact me and just do that phone conversation, ask some questions yourself, and let me ask you some questions. I really believe, without a doubt, that we could be a help to your ministry. I don't know it all. I'm not going to pretend like I know it all, but I'm not a novice either. And yet I know people, and I know the church, and I know that it is God's purpose to use the church in these last hours. If the church does not make the difference that it has been called, our nation and our world is going to suffer. But when we are at our best, and we are at our best when God is on our side, we can make an impact. I'm asking you to consider church consulting and church revitalization from the Wooden Desk. There's information on the site there that gives you our phone number, gives you our email address. You can contact me. You can write an email, or you can contact me personally, and I'll be glad to take time to talk with you. Whether it's a church consult in the full scope, and I'm going to discuss more of that in other videos, whether it's an empowerment weekend to come and do a seminar or a conference. I do those things and love coming in and being just a blessing to the ministry. But I really believe that if you will make consideration for church consultation and revitalization from the Wooden Desk, it will make an eternal impact in your life personally, in your leadership, and in your church and its future growth. I thank you today for taking time to listen to this video. Look forward to talking with you God bless and have a great day.